Good morning everyone and welcome to this presentation. I'm Giulia Sulis and today I'm going to present on a study conducted with Jenefer Philp on the connections between the classroom environment and engagement in the language classroom. Research by John Hattie based on over 800 meta-analyses and over 50,000 research papers has looked at the different aspects that contribute to success in primary, secondary and tertiary contexts. One of the findings was that the classroom environment itself makes a difference to success. However, it is not the physical aspects of the environment that make this difference. Class size, furniture layout, or the latest technology were not the factors that emerged as important, but the relational factors. The combined studies found indeed that it is the people inside the class and the kind of relationships that they build with one another that are most vital to a positive learning environment. Current research on the classroom environment has shown that this is multifaceted. Key factors that shape the learning environment include interactions with peers, the role of the teacher, the tasks that students engage in, and an appropriate balance between challenge and support. In this study, we examined the learning environment through the lens of environmental complexity. This construct was developed by Jenefer and colleagues, and it is made up of two main components. The first one is environmental challenge. This refers to the challenges, the tasks, activities, goals, structures, and expectations intended to guide student action and thinking. However, in order to be able to successfully cope with these challenges, students need appropriate support. The other element of environmental complexity is indeed environmental support. This refers to the instrumental, social, and emotional resources made available to help students reach these environmental challenges. A study by Jenefer and colleagues on environmental complexity based on interviews, questionnaires, and classroom observations in 6 subjects, including Spanish as a second language, has looked at the different components of environmental challenge and support. Among the factors that compose the environmental challenge, they include opportunities for higher order thinking and ways of talking about this, tasks that push students to move higher in their ability range, clear and relevant learning goals, including real-world tasks, importance and relevance of the activity to students, and clear expectations from the teachers, including visible outcomes. In terms of environmental support, they found motivational support, so including autonomy, competence, and interest, feedback on performance, interactivity and transactional learning, supportive relationships in the classroom, and active and hands-on learning. So let's go back to Hattie's research. So what aspects of the learning environment play a role in successful learning? Positive classroom relationships, high teacher expectations, motivation to learn and sustain effort, and tasks matching interest, needs, and proficiency. So we can see how elements of the environmental challenge and environmental support play a key role in learning. So in this study, we wanted to investigate what is the relationship between the classroom environment and engagement. But first, we have to define engagement. So following Jenefer Philp and Susan Duchesne's definition, we see engagement as a state of heightened attention and involvement in which participation is reflected not only in the cognitive dimension, but in social, behavioral, and affective dimensions as well. So we see engagement as a multi-dimensional construct made up of different components. In particular, in this study, we're going to look at 4 dimensions of engagement. The first one is cognitive engagement, which refers to focused attention, reaction to challenges, metacognitive, and cognitive strategy use. The second one is emotional engagement, which refers to positive and negative affective reactions towards the learning activities and the learning environment. These include enjoyment, interest, enthusiasm, but also, for instance, anxiety, boredom, or frustration. Next, we have behavioral engagement, which refers to active involvement, participation, initiative taking, and persistence tasks. And finally, social engagement refers to interactiveness and supportiveness among peers. However, it's really important to remind that also cognitive, emotional, and behavioral types of engagement integrate a social dimension as well. So the purpose of this study and the key research question is what are the interconnections between the learning environment and language learning engagement? So the participants in this study were students from 2 French classes at a public research university in northwest England. We had a first-year beginner class and a second-year advanced class, taught by the same experienced tutor. The data collection methods included 2 main steps. First, we observed and video recorded 4 lessons spread over the course of 2 academic terms, and then we interviewed students and teachers after these 4 lessons. In terms of data analysis, with the video and audio material, we created a classroom logbook, including all the information about the tasks, the students' behavior, the interactions between peers and the teacher. And with the interview materials, we conducted thematic analysis, which is a process of identification, analysis, interpretation, and report of themes within qualitative data. So let's move now on to the findings of our study. So the findings of the study have shown that 3 main elements of the learning environment had an influence on students' engagement in the foreign language classroom: peers, teachers, and the tasks. So let's start with peers. In particular, we found that mutual aid in the face of challenges, peer encouragement, and a friendly and non-judgmental classroom atmosphere played a key role on students' engagement in the classroom. Peer support had an influence on different dimensions of engagement, including effort and involvement, initiative taking and volunteering, persistence with classroom activities even in the face of challenges, maintenance of interaction throughout the lesson, and task enjoyment. And here we have an example from Rosie. She said, "We normally work together as a group, so if one of us doesn't understand something, then maybe somebody else will know, or we can look it up together and kind of help each other to understand better." And Amy commented on the friendly and non-judgmental classroom atmosphere in the French class. She said, "It's a very friendly environment. You can kind of be friendly with everyone and not have to worry too much about getting things wrong." Indeed, supportive relationships were a key part of the environmental support in Chernov's model. In addition to peer support, also peer interaction was key to engagement. At a group level, the perceived peer effort and involvement, as well as the perceived motivation of peers, had an influence on effort, participation, initiative taking, and enjoyment, so both behavioral and emotional dimensions of engagement. But also the classroom atmosphere and dynamics had an influence on engagement, so we can see a chain reaction mechanism of engagement in the language classroom. And here we have an example from Lisa. She said, "I think it's because if I see other people look like, I can't be bothered with this, I just feel a little bit like, but because again in groups, everyone gets a lot more awake and they're like, let's talk. So yes, let's talk." So far we looked at peers. Now let's move on to teachers and their influence on engagement in the language classroom. Her findings have shown that the teacher encouragement and support had an influence on many dimensions of engagement, including persistence, task participation, initiative taking, class enjoyment, and also reduced anxiety. So we can see their influence on both behavioral and emotional types of engagement. And in particular, this kind of support and encouragement was shown through one-to-one help during group tasks, a supportive and pressure-free classroom atmosphere, positive feedback, and equal opportunities for active involvement in the classroom activities. Here, for instance, we have an example from Alice about the supportive and pressure-free classroom atmosphere built by the teacher. She said, "It's probably one of my favorite classes because I feel like the teacher is very good. If I answer it wrong, it's not, he doesn't tell you off, so I feel like quite supported in this lesson." And the third aspect of the learning environment that influenced engagement were the tasks assigned by the teacher. In particular, in order to favor engagement in the language classroom, tasks had to have a balance between sense of challenge and students' competencies. So tasks had to match students' proficiency level and be slightly challenging but not too difficult. Tasks had also to be related to students' own learning needs and goals. And finally, they had to be interactive and hands-on to favor engagement in the language classroom. So let's look at this balance between a sense of challenge and students' competencies. We found that when tasks were slightly challenging but not too difficult, students invested higher effort, attention, but also cognitive investment, so both behavioral and cognitive engagement. If tasks were too easy, they didn't need to invest much effort, so they also displayed low attention and involvement. Whereas if tasks were too difficult, they could feel overwhelmed, frustrated, anxious, and more willing to quit the task altogether. We also found that when tasks were slightly challenging, students were more willing to help each other, and so this fostered a sense of supportiveness. So we could see how this balance between challenge and competences was key to these multiple dimensions of engagement. And here we have an example from Alice. She said, it's kind of a hit or miss sometimes in my writing classes, where it's like too difficult and I shut down, or it's like the perfect amount of difficult and interesting where it pushes my motivation. And our findings seem to match once again Jenefer et al.'s model of environmental complexity. They found that opportunities for higher order thinking and ways of talking about this, but also tasks that push students to move higher in their ability range, were a key component of environmental challenge. So we can see once again how challenge and support are needed not only to build an optimal classroom environment, but also to drive engagement in the language classroom. In addition, tasks had to be relevant to students' own learning needs, goals, and interests. We found that students reported higher engagement when the activity at hand was seen as directly relevant to their own learning needs, but also their personal interest. In addition, they also displayed higher effort and involvement when the activity was perceived as useful to enhance their own competences. And here we have an example from Lily. She explains how the French class is useful to actually get some speaking practice. She said, I get to practice the on-the-spot speaking part, which I don't really get to do outside of the class. So I use that opportunity to speak French with someone else. And similarly, in Jenefer and colleagues' model, the importance and relevance of the activity and also the motivational support offered by the task through the provision of autonomy, a sense of competence, and interest development were key components of an optimal learning environment. In order to be engaging, tasks also have to be interactive and hands-on, and we could see how these type of activities could favor direct and continuous participation of students in the classroom activities. They also offered opportunities for equal involvement in the classroom, opportunities for authentic communication. Students could also offer their own personal input into the task, and these type of tasks also favored relatedness and enjoyment. So we could see how interactive hands-on activities favored not only behavioral engagement, but also social and emotional engagement as well. And here we have an example from Sam. He said, when somebody else is answering a question, I don't need to be thinking, which is maybe sometimes why people lose focus, because they don't have to be. But if everyone is in individual groups and having to interact and work and being observed, then that makes you even more motivated for sure. And we can see how our findings match, once again, Jenefer and colleagues' model. Indeed, they found that interactivity and transactional learning and active and hands-on learning were part of environmental support and contributed to a positive learning environment. So we can see, once again, the interaction between the learning environment and engagement in the language classroom. So our findings have shown the mutual relationships between the learning environment and engagement. Indeed, peers, teachers, and tasks had a huge influence on behavioral, cognitive, emotional, and social dimensions of engagement. However, when students were authentically engaged in the classroom, this also influenced, in turn, the learning environment. So we can really see a mutual relationship between the learning environment and engagement in the language classroom. So the findings of our study have shown that not only the learning environment and engagement mutually shape each other in the language classroom, but both a sense of challenge and support are needed to foster different dimensions of engagement in the classroom, in line with Jenefer and colleagues' model. In particular, we found that environmental challenge could be promoted through the provision of tasks that are complex, they require higher order thinking, and match students' ability and proficiency. In terms of environmental support, this was fostered through positive relationships among peers, the encouragement and support provided by the teacher, a friendly, active, and pressure-free classroom atmosphere where all students felt free to engage and make mistakes and get involved, interactive and hands-on tasks, and finally, tasks that were relevant to students' learning goals, interests, and needs. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to your feedback and any questions you might have.